I have just removed every single leaf of this hornbeam. And yes, I'm doing this unusually late in the season. Should every leaf be removed? Are there times when you shouldn't defoliate at all? Removing leaves is not a purpose in itself. On a healthy tree, the right time of the year, defoliating can help balance energy, create backbudding, and stabilize the growing patterns in the tree. Next to that, it provides access and insights for work that's difficult to do on a tree when it is in full leaf. If you look at a hornbeam like this, you see there is very strong areas, like here on top, with a lot of extension, coarse growth, big leaves. And we have the weaker zones down below, where the branches may have only grown 2, 3, 4 leaves. The leaves are smaller, the internodes are shorter. And this is a problem. If you allow this to continue, then over time, the top will get stronger and stronger, and the bottom branches will get ever weaker. So what we do with defoliation is provide the opportunity to have the same amount of foliage around the tree. That's not what I'm doing at this moment. Of course, defoliation is a technique that is applied to very mature trees. We don't do this on very young plants. Now, other reasons for defoliation, and particularly partial defoliation. And now when we're talking about partial defoliation, this is not what we mean. We mean to remove a number of the leaves, particularly the larger leaves, on the outside of new branches, so that more light can come into the crown. So you leave a part of the smaller leaves on the branch, you just take the bigger leaves out. By removing part of the leaves, sunlight penetrates into the canopy, allowing backbudding to occur, and therefore increasing your ramification, the number of branches on your tree, and overall make sure that inner branches remain viable and new growth, like these big branches here on top, don't take over. Again, that's not why I'm defoliating now. Now, of course, defoliating a tree aids enormously also in triggering another flush of growth. So you could say, for defoliation, you don't do it because it is a bonsai technique. You do it because you really want to trigger a certain response from the tree, or you want to cause an effect in the tree. We are now at the middle of summer, or actually at the end of summer. It's the end of August. And you can see the leaves here, they don't look all that great anymore. They don't contribute as much to the photosynthesis as they would when they're nice and healthy. So removing those leaves can aid in having a better photosynthesis on the rest of the tree. Well, if I would have that as an ultimate aim, then why am I removing all the leaves? I'll get there in a second, but first let us look at how do you defoliate and when should you not defoliate. Now, if you look at leaves, leaves don't just sit as a leaf on the branch itself. There's always a petiole, the little leaf stem that sits between the leaf itself and the branch that it is on. And with my scissors, I'm trying to cut exactly through those. That will leave a tiny little bit of the petiole sitting there, but more importantly, it avoids the bud that sits there from being damaged. Of course, it's very tempting to just go through the tree and pull off the leaves. But what then can happen is you also pull off, for instance, the terminal bud, which is now missing here. So that's ideally not what we do. I do realize the tree has many leaves, so sometimes you can be tempted to do that. I know that I am, and quite frequently I do. Now, why do I do pretty much a full defoliation? First of all, a partial defoliation is mainly aimed at opening up the canopy, ensuring lots of light getting into the inside, and with that internal backbudding to occur. Meanwhile, you want to retain the growing strength of the tree. You want to keep some shading on the inside of the canopy, and all in all, you want to keep up the strength. In this case, I'm going to go for a pretty much full defoliation. Full defoliation basically means you remove every single leaf. You can only do this on a tree that is really, really healthy. I know this tree is really healthy. It hasn't been pruned much this year. I pruned it once in early spring. It's been fertilized 3 times already this year. I fertilized it again just today. Some fertilizer still sitting on the pot. And with that, I know this tree is full of health, it's full of energy, and it is ready to go. Now for the last 2 weeks, it has been really hot and really dry. And in fact, for the last 2 months, we've had hardly any rain. But now, for 2 or 3 days, it's been raining, temperatures have dropped, but in 3-4 days, temperatures are expected to rise again. And that is when I expect this tree to have a massive shoot of growth. And I want to use that shoot of growth to rebuild the structure of this tree. Now in this case, I might leave a few small leaves on, and that's more because I'm lazy than because I want to keep them on, but there's a lot of leaves on this plant. So let's circle back to the late season. It is now the end of August, and that is normally very late for defoliation of a bonsai. And I do that on this tree because, well, first of all, I mentioned the leaves don't look very good. Next to that, we just had this heat wave. Thirdly, it is a hornbeam, and hornbeam traditionally grow throughout the year in my climate. So the moment the weather is good, and it has enough fertilizer and water and sun, of course, it will reshoot with leaves. Next to that, in August is also the time when a lot of fungal infections take place. So for me, this is a good moment to remove all these leaves and wait for a new shooting of this branch of this plant. Hopefully with that, reducing the foliar infection with mildew. Now what happens when I remove all these leaves from the plant? Simply said, all the breaks are removed from the tree. All these leaves now, they produce hormones. And these hormones tell the plant, I've got lots of foliage mass. I'm doing well. There's no real need to increase my foliage mass. And in fact, the balance between the roots and foliage is perfect. By removing the leaves, and I tell the plant, hey, your solar panels are gone. Time to start growing again. With that, it will trigger all the buds on the tree to start opening up. Now what I might do in the process is snip off these terminal buds on these branches that have grown sufficiently. And then the buds that typically here signal I am the leading bud, you can stay dormant, they're gone. So there's no signaling along this branch, there is an active bud at the end. So the terminal bud is gone, and therefore all the inner buds get a moment to shine, to grow, and to really start sprouting. So that's what I expect to happen over the next 2 or 3 weeks. After this defoliation, it starts to heat up. I've just fertilized it as mentioned. It is now nice and wet and cool. And then I expect buds to pop all over this tree. Not just on the ends of the branches, no, also on the inside. And with that, what I do get this year is a second big flush on this tree that really goes on the inside. It doubles the number of branches, it doubles the ramification of this tree, and with that, it creates a denser canopy. And next year, the leaves will be a lot smaller again. Now you see all these leaves here, they are already quite small. And why is that? Well, it is because this is already a tree with a very good ramification. It has lots of leaves, and with that, the leaves are small. It's not hard. More leaves means a lot of total surface area. That means that for a small plant like this, the leaves don't need to be all that big. But the only way to get that is to trigger your tree into creating more side branches than it needs. That's what I do now. I remove the leaves in the hope the tree flushes again, creates more side branches, even though it doesn't really need more side branches. For a tree, this is already quite good. Then of course, after I've done all this, there's another opportunity, but I'll get there in a second. Naturally, in early spring, you could also do full defoliation. At that point, what you're looking for is a resprouting with smaller leaves. This is often done if you go and put your tree in an exhibition. At that point you want the smallest leaves possible, but keep in mind that if you defoliate at that time, which normally is about 4 to 6 weeks after first flush, you weaken your tree considerably, and there's a significant risk of the tree weakening. These, you mean? You want to know what these are? And for defoliation, as said, ideally you just prune them off by cutting the leaves off. You can do this with one of these regular bonsai scissors, but there's also very tiny pruning scissors. And these are flower scissors, I think, from the garden center, but you can of course also get regular Japanese defoliation scissors. And sometimes, when I really want to get it over with, I do pull it by hand, but as said, it's not recommended. And yes, as said, it is late. So let's see whether this actually resprouts. I do hope so. We do have another 8 weeks or so before the frost hits, so that would give the tree enough time to resprout, grow, regain the energy, and set buds for next year. If you do like this sort of videos, where I don't just show how, but also the why, then maybe consider subscribing, because that is what my channel is all about. Showing you the techniques, how to do it, but also why do we do it. Now keep in mind, I only do this with species that grow throughout the summer. So for linden tree, I would not do this. The Japanese maple, I would be concerned. I would only do it if it is nice and really healthy and about to flush. I would not do this on an oak, but I would do it on an elm. Elm responds really well to defoliation. Of course, after a full defoliation, your tree is very sensitive to sunlight. So don't put a fully defoliated tree directly in full sun, but wait until it starts flushing again. And now to the hidden benefit of a full defoliation. What you can very clearly see is a branch like this started off as a tiny little side branch here, had a short internode, a longer internode, a much longer internode, and then grew into one of the strongest sprouts of the tree, which of course I don't really want. And we have branches like this one. They're optimally placed for a place in the canopy, but they've grown upwards rather than horizontal, and this is an ideal time to gently add some wire to these branches. Position them in the place where we want them, in the shape how we want them. Doing this in midwinter would invariably cause dieback, but this time of the year, this works well. And as said, removing the terminal bud aids in ramification building. Not all branches that have grown long are desirable. In fact, throughout the tree we can now go in and say, all these branches that have grown longer than I want them to be, I can now already prune them back, triggering more inner buds than you'd get with just a regular prune, because now there's light everywhere. We're removing these terminal buds and we're just creating a new nice canopy outline. This of course you can also do in winter after the summer growth is gone, but then you don't have the added benefit of an additional flush now. This of course doesn't have to be very complex. You can just go through the tree and say, I'm completely pruning the outline, and when I find a branch that I don't really like, then I'm just either pruning it off, pruning it shorter, or using a little bit of wire and placing it in the angle that I want. Be careful to not prune everything out that doesn't look pretty. Sometimes the randomness that nature creates is the pretty part, so don't clean it up too much. So basically, defoliating creates a temporary design window. A time where you can see all the branches, you can see the full structure of the tree, and as the tree is still in full flush, and it will start growing again this season, it will respond very, very quickly to any actions that you take at this point in time. Keep in mind directional pruning. Keep in mind at least holding 2 buds on every single pruned branch so it can duplicate, and remove as many of the terminal buds as you possibly can to really encourage this to bud further on the inside. Now what will happen next, the next step for this tree, is that all these inner buds will start popping over the next couple of weeks. That is of course a little bit dependent on the weather that I'm going to have, but once it does, then you get a lot of new branches on the inside, increasing ramification. By shortening all these branches, I make sure that all these new side branches actually occur on the inside of the tree. All my little pruning wounds that I've made will close before winter. Actually, they will close over the next couple of days. Any wiring that has been put in place will actually set before winter, and therefore I can unwire either in winter or in spring without the risk of it all veering back. And all in all, the tree has just gained another growing season worth of branches just by taking this action. Of course, it could be that now the weather doesn't recover. It doesn't get warmer and this tree will not sprout. Then I've weakened this tree, so it is a bit of a tricky thing to do if you don't know whether your tree is really healthy and if you can't trust your weather forecast. But hey, we all trust the weather forecast, right?